Hello and good evening. India is on the brink of winning a historic Oval Test match in this ongoing series against England. We'll keep you updated on that in Newsnight tonight, and we'll be also talking about how the Taliban is claiming to have vanquished the Panjshir. The resistance front says it may be down but it's not out. But Pakistan has drawn attention to its hand in supporting the Taliban with the presence of ISI Chief General Faiz Hamid in Kabul. We'll look at why Pakistan's intelligence agency chief has been seen in the Afghan capital when there's a tussle going on between different Taliban factions for key positions in the new government. We'll also be getting you the latest on the political, the national COVID situation, which is getting better, but Nipah virus outbreak in Kerala and dengue in Uttar Pradesh are still causing concern. But first, our headlines. Indications that the last bastion of resistance against the Taliban in Afghanistan has fallen. The Taliban releases a video of raising its flag at the governor's house in Panjshir to claim victory. But the NRF denies losing the battle, says it's still fighting on from strategic positions. Confabulations in Kabul remain ongoing related to government formation. Taliban spokesperson says an inclusive government will be put in place soon. Media reports indicate that the Taliban has issued invitations to 6 countries including Pakistan, China and Russia for government formation event. Prime Minister Narendra Modi interacts online with healthcare workers and vaccination beneficiaries in Himachal Pradesh, India's first state to administer at least 1 dose of the COVID vaccine to its entire eligible population. Terms the state a champion in the battle against pandemic, urges everyone who's taken the first dose to definitely go for the second shot. India reaches another COVID landmark, over 1 crore vaccination doses in the last 24 hours, third time in the last 11 days. The battle against the spread of Nipah virus also intensifies in Kerala. Samples collected from animals and fruits from the dead boy's home in Kozhikode. Strict local restrictions to curb the disease. Report awaited on 8 samples collected from humans, 251 contacts of the dead boy under observation. The BJP takes on Rahul Gandhi for tweeting an old photo related to the farmers' agitation. The party says the former Congress president is not in touch with ground realities and displaying politics of fake news. Charges him of keeping mum on the success of the nationwide vaccination campaign and controversial statement given by Chhattisgarh Chief Minister's father. Central team tours Bihar to assess the damage done by the floods. Carries out an aerial survey to get an overview of the situation. Also meets state officials. The Bihar government seeks relief funds amounting to 3,781 crore rupees for the losses incurred so far. Indian para sportspersons get a rousing reception back home upon their return from the Tokyo Paralympics. Fans crowd Delhi's IGI airport to give them a grand welcome home. The para sportspersons also thank the nation for constantly keeping up their spirits and morale. And in cricket, Jasprit Bumrah becomes the fastest Indian bowler to take 100 test wickets in 24 matches. Bumrah beats Kapil Dev's record, who took 100 test wickets in 25 games. First up now, the Taliban raised its flag at the governor's house in Panjshir Valley to claim that the last bastion against the complete takeover of Afghanistan has fallen. But the resistance says otherwise, claiming it retains presence in strategic locations and is fighting on. The Taliban also admitted today that Pakistan's ISI Chief General Faiz Hamid was in Kabul and met Taliban leader Mullah Baradar today to iron out some differences between different Taliban factions over government formation, which still hangs fire. Here's more.
The Taliban claimed victory on Monday over opposition forces in the Panjshir Valley, northeast of Kabul, declaring that it completed the group's takeover of Afghanistan and promising to announce a new government soon. A Taliban video uploaded on Monday showed the group raising their flag at the Panjshir governor's office. Taliban spokesperson said that anyone who takes up arms is the enemy of the people and the country. The Taliban assured the people of Panjshir that there would be no discriminatory act against them.
If anyone takes up arms, takes the name of resistance and riots, without a doubt, he is the enemy of the whole country and our people. Because the people do not want the war to continue and there is no reason for anyone to continue the war. So the people need to know that the Islamic Emirate ended the war and the war ended. Now we must all work for prosperity and the preservation of freedom, and in this case the nation is with us and we see the happiness of the nation and we still want the cooperation of our nation.
The leader of the resistance forces, Ahmad Masood, said that they are in Panjshir. In a tweet, he said, "We are in Panjshir and our resistance will continue." Meanwhile, Pakistani military is reportedly helping the Taliban group fight the resistance. Pakistani Air Force reportedly used drones to drop bombs on Panjshir, while the country also sent special forces to assist the Taliban in capturing the defiant province. This coincided with Pakistani spy agency ISI chief's arrival in Kabul. Meanwhile, Iran has condemned attack by Taliban in the Panjshir Valley of Afghanistan, which they say violates the international law.
No one should let this path end in fratricide. The Taliban must live up to their commitments, starving the people of Panjshir and cutting off their water, electricity, etc. is a source of regret.
In another development, the Taliban have reportedly invited Russia, Turkey, China, Iran, Pakistan and Qatar to take part in the ceremony of announcing the composition of the new Afghani government. In another development, United Nations Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator Martin Griffiths met the Taliban leader Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar in Kabul on Sunday. He reaffirmed UN's commitment to deliver impartial humanitarian assistance and protection to millions in need in Afghanistan. Martin Griffiths also met President of the International Committee of the Red Cross, Peter Maurer, in Kabul. Martin Griffiths, in a tweet, said, "Met with ICRC P. Maurer, ICRC in Kabul, Afghanistan, where we spoke about the need to maintain impartial and independent humanitarian access in Afghanistan, as well as continue to stay and deliver alongside the people of Afghanistan." International Committee of the Red Cross said that in Afghanistan, 18.4 million people need humanitarian assistance, 7 million people have no access to healthcare facilities, 40 million people don't have enough to eat, 3.1 million children are at the risk of acute malnutrition. The needs remain immense. In another development, Secretary of State Antony Blinken has departed for Doha, Qatar and Ramstein, Germany. During his tour to the Gulf country and Germany, who were instrumental in helping Washington evacuate thousands of people out of Kabul, Blinken will meet with senior Qatari officials in Doha and German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas at Ramstein Air Base, where he will also co-host a ministerial meeting on Afghanistan. Meanwhile, the airport in Kabul has reopened. Taliban members were stationed outside Kabul's Hamid Karzai International Airport on Monday, following the resumption of some domestic flights in Afghanistan. Ariana Afghan Airlines said flights between Kabul and the western city of Herat, Mazar-e-Sharif in northern Afghanistan and Kandahar in south started on Saturday. Reopening the airport had been a high priority for the Taliban as they seek to restore order after the turmoil of the past 3 weeks. A technical team from Qatar reopened the Kabul airport for aid and domestic services. Bureau Report, DD India.
And it's time now to get to our In Focus tonight, which is Taliban Pakistan ISIS nexus out in the open. And for now, we have Major General Dhruv C. Katoch, retired Director, India Foundation, with us. Good evening to you, General Katoch. What do you make of this sort of an effort that Pakistan seems to be up to right now in Kabul?
Well, Pakistan has been giving support to the Taliban for the last 20 years. Osama bin Laden has been found in their area. So it is no secret that Pakistan is really the state which has supported terrorism through and through, and which uses terrorism as an instrument of its state policy. Now, with specific reference to Afghanistan and the recent developments which have taken place, the initial attacks which were launched by the Taliban on Afghan positions, they were also coordinated and planned by the Pakistan military, and this was done at the behest, at the level of the Pakistan Army Chief. They were provided full-scale logistics and intelligence backing, and in some cases, troops were also involved. So now we come down to what happened at Panjshir. At Panjshir was the first time when a stiff resistance was given to the Taliban forces, who found themselves incapable of taking on a very determined resistance force who were fighting for their freedom. Now, when we come to this situation, we must remember that Panjshir unfortunately was isolated from all sides. It had no access to any external power, and it was surrounded on all sides by the Taliban forces.
Yes.
Now, despite being under such serious handicaps, they fought on. Now, to dislodge them from certain areas, I think the Pakistanis have got at least 2 battalions of the special forces. They have brought in their artillery, they have brought in their helicopters and their drones. And using all these forces, plus the military planning of the Pakistan Army, they have actually now captured some parts of Panjshir. But let me make this very clear. While some parts of Panjshir have been captured, the entire area has not been cleared, and the resistance will continue. It is my belief that the resistance, while continuing in Panjshir, will also spread to other parts of the country, and hopefully this government of the Taliban will be dislodged, because it is an oppressor government. It is a government forced on the people by Pakistan, and we can truly say now that Afghanistan is really being occupied by Pakistan.
Yes, General Khatoj, I'll come back to this question of whether Panjshir has entirely indeed fallen or not. But, if you talk about Pakistan's involvement with the Taliban and support to the Taliban, it had been covert. I mean, even in the case of Panjshir, it remained covert. But this presence of ISI Chief General Hamid in Faiz Hamid in Kabul, meeting in fact Mullah Baradar as well today, and that has been admitted by Taliban spokesperson. That connotes something else entirely, doesn't it?
Oh, that's absolutely right. You see, alongside what has happened is that there is a factional fight. There is a factional fight going on within the Taliban and the Haqqani network. Now, this is an important point which needs to be understood. The Haqqani network has been backed fully by Pakistan, and Pakistan believes that it can actually control the Haqqani network. Pakistan also believes it will be difficult to control the Afghan Taliban once they are in power. So they want, in this power sharing structure, they want dominance of the Haqqani network, their people in key positions, especially around Kabul, especially in defense and in the interior ministries. I think that is the game plan, and because they were not coming to any agreement, the Pakistan ISI chief has come there in an attempt to smooth matters over. Whether he's successful or not, time will tell. But even if they can form a government now, I see this government is going to be very, very unstable, because there are internal contradictions between the various factions which will come into power.
But now there was a report there also that 6 countries have been invited for the unveiling of the government in Kabul, and that will happen anytime soon. What does that indicate? Because right now we haven't heard of any breakthrough coming through as far as overall consensus is concerned as to what kind of a government should it be.
In my view, I think they will form some form of a government. A consensus will be made at some point of time or the other, and certainly before the swearing in takes place in the Shura. I believe it's going to be done in the presidential palace. Now, why these 6 specific countries? Now, these are the Islamic countries which have actually supported, less China, they have actually supported the Taliban through and through. Now, China has come in because China and Pakistan are on the same wicket. I don't feel that the Chinese are going to enter Afghanistan in a big way. They will continue to ride piggyback on Pakistan.
Okay.
But when you look at Turkey, Turkey has got its own interest in Afghanistan.
Yes.
Iran has got its own interest. Qatar, of course, the meetings were held there. So all these countries have got own specific pinpoint interest in Afghanistan, which is why I think only these 6 countries have been invited. More importantly, if they invite other countries, I really don't think they'll come. So they also have to, they can only issue an invitation to a country whom they have reasonable hope of coming. I'm not sure whether the Chinese will come or not, but the other countries certainly will be present.
Yes, it's telling that even a country like Tajikistan, which Afghanistan shares its border with, their leaders have not been invited. But G. Parthasarathy is also with us. He's been our envoy to Pakistan in Islamabad. G. Parthasarathy, what do you make of the situation? I mean, if somebody from Pakistan had to be there in Kabul to, iron out differences between different factions, it could have been political phase. Why the ISI chief?
Oh, well, let's put it this way. Most of these Taliban leaders have spent 10 to 20 years in Pakistan. The only people they interacted with was the ISI. And therefore, the ISI knows each one of them backwards, including what they eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. There are also some reports, I think I've been hearing, that perhaps after the DGISI was there the things are being delayed because there may be some drastic changes in what was envisaged earlier.
Right.
I mean, a government which includes Hibatullah Akhundzada to head it, Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar there, certainly, and then you have
It's being said that the Haqqanis have a problem with Akhundzad himself.
Yes. So Stanekzai is sort of also was there. Maybe what you're looking at is this last minute, since they're not announcing it, you could well have changes for the worse. Because let's face it, as I said, breakfast, lunch and dinner, the only human being outside the crowd these people met either when they were in Balochistan, in camps or elsewhere, were these leaders. So I think the Pakistanis. So I think don't underestimate this. And I am not at all surprised that we've just called these 5 countries. Iran has today condemned them for the attack on Panjshir.
Yes.
The Tajiks are no friends of theirs. They cannot be, because 35% of the population is of Afghanistan is Tajik. And if the Tajiks join together with the Hazaras and others, they will have a majority over the Pashtuns.
But the kind of differences that we're seeing, Mr. Parthasarathy, do you think there can be a split within the Taliban, a coup within a coup in Kabul?
Well, what will happen is, I wouldn't call it a split, but there would certainly be an effort made to, I mean, at least to get rid of Akhundzada, to get rid of Baradar, and to get rid of Stanekzai, and a couple of others who want Iran, this country, to have good relations with all its neighbors. So as I said, given the experience that the ISI has of dealing with these people, and the number one man of the ISI was there, not the army chief in ceremonial terms or anyway, Pakistani ministers count for nothing, they salute lieutenant colonels. So you are faced with this situation. And frankly, I would not mind, because already there have been objections about what has happened from Iran.
Yes.
There are objections from Tashkent. And these are old friends of India in dealing with Pakistani maneuvers inside Afghanistan. So you're into an uncertain situation.
Okay.
Uncertain.
Let's explore this. Let's explore this further. General Katoch, do you think there's a situation where things might break down, and as even some people in the US, especially those in the armed forces, they've been saying that Afghanistan is headed for civil war.
Actually, I have been stating right from 15th August onwards that Afghanistan is headed for civil war. A situation like this can never be stable. There are too many internal contradictions between the Taliban, but I would say more than the internal contradiction within Afghanistan and the Taliban are the interference which is coming from outside. Now the Chinese have got certain specific interests which they are trying to push through the Pakistanis. Pakistan has got a very specific interest which was enunciated right in 1990 by their then Army Chief General Aslam Beg, who at that time propagated his theory of strategic depth. And in his theory of strategic depth, he very clearly mentioned what he meant by it. And he meant an emirate which consists of Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, and the Central Asian republics. Now, I don't think Iran will be very happy with that sort of an emirate, and neither will Afghanistan be very happy. They don't want to play second fiddle to the Pakistanis, but that is the prime reason I feel that Pakistan is concerned about the Afghan Taliban. And they're not so much concerned about the Haqqanis because they are very, very closely aligned in their ideological and other objectives. But with the Afghan Taliban, they have got great concerns. For another reason also, the Afghan Taliban is very closely allied with the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which is the Taliban of Pakistan. Now, there will be great disturbances also now taking place across the Durand line, and we are already seeing that happening. So I think Pakistan is not going to get away easy in this game. Which they are trying to play, I think everybody is going to lose. The Pakistanis will lose, the Chinese will lose, the Russians will lose if they start interfering. And unfortunately, the Afghan people, the poor innocent Afghan people, will be the worst sufferers. I'm not sure at this point of time what the international opinion can do, except providing aid. But if you really want a solution, I think the correct discourse would be to sanction Pakistan. The fountainhead has to be resolved. Unless you sanction Pakistan, I don't think we can carry out any resolution within Afghanistan.
Okay, G. Parthasarathy, do you feel that there is a lot of talk, there has been a lot of talk of sanctioning Pakistan, but when you come down to seeing it practically happen, then things get a little blurred?
That's not right. It's impossible because for the simple reason, it will be vetoed by the Chinese.
Yes.
And right now the Russians also, they are not interested particularly of a great love for the Russians, for the people of Afghanistan. Don't forget they were very roughly treated when they sent their army in, and the country finally split up into several parts. So what is going to happen is you can't carry this through. If they offend the US and the international community, then what they need crucially, they won't get, which is hard cash money.
Yes.
That the Chinese don't give. The Chinese only send workers to build mines, to build bridges, and make money. So, and China's only interest in Afghanistan is its vast resources of minerals and natural resources, which China will want to benefit from. So, it's acted nice, and it will continue to act nice. But we'll have to see what is the final composition. If you find elements that who are independent and influential losing their jobs or going down in importance, and the Haqqanis, the most dangerous network there. After all, let us not forget they are very close to the Jaish-e-Mohammed just before the attack on our parliament. The Haqqanis come, they are a wing of the ISI, and if they control the Interior Ministry and have access to weapons taken from the old Afghan army, then we are going to have more serious issues to look at.
Right, but things at this point are still uncertain as long as the government is not in place, and at the same time there is a huge amount of concern in the international community at the United Nations level about the humanitarian crisis, which is only getting worse in the absence of Governor General Katoch. I believe there's a meeting that's been planned in the second week of September as well. So what happens on that front till then?
You see, in my view, this humanitarian assistance is again a question mark for a very simple reason. Who is going to distribute the aid? Now, I don't think the Taliban government, as and when it is formed, will permit external agencies, let us say the Red Cross or say any peace mission from India, to distribute that aid. So who's going to distribute that aid? And I believe it will be the elements from within the government itself. Now, when they distribute the aid, they will distribute it only to their own people and not to the people who really need it the most. So where will that aid go? Will some portion of that aid also go to Pakistan? You see, Pakistan has been stealing all its life. So will it take away some portion of this aid also? Now, there are a lot of question marks. Now, it sounds very good that we are carrying out humanitarian assistance, but its practical application on the ground, I think, is going to be a very difficult task. And somehow or the other, the government has to be held accountable. But I still maintain my initial stand. If you want to hold the Afghan government accountable, I'm afraid you've got to, the puppet master has to be held accountable. Pakistan has to be held accountable. Today, Afghanistan has been occupied by Pakistan. And these people fought for 20 years to rid themselves of the Americans. Now, what is that sacrifice for? To get the Pakistanis in and to get a government in which is anti the people. It is very nice to hear their spokesperson saying that we are all for liberty and love and brotherhood. They haven't exhibited any of that on the ground. So I'm afraid the Afghan people are going to be in for a very difficult time, regardless of the fact that the international community pumps in millions of dollars worth of food aid to them.
And is it possible for Pakistan, General Katoch, to also make some of the weaponry that the Americans left behind, or with the previous, as G. Parthasarathy was saying, the erstwhile Afghan army, to make it serviceable, all those weapons that were left in a dysfunctional condition?
You see, as far as the heavier weapon systems are concerned, like the helicopters and the aircraft, if Pakistan can get them to the area, they would. But I don't think they have the capacity and the capability to get them on road. There is also talk that the Chinese can carry out reverse engineering and remake the product. But I think these are older vintage weapons. And China already has got weapons, the aircraft systems which are more modern than the ones which are in use.
Okay.
Now, coming down to the smaller weapons, especially the infantry rifles and the light machine guns. Now, I think that is going to be a totally different kettle of fish. I don't think the Taliban would like to hand them over to Pakistan. This is something which perhaps they would like to keep for themselves.
Okay. G. Parthasarathy, do you feel that there is room for friction between the Taliban and Pakistan as well? Right now, of course, Pakistan marching in to the aid of the Taliban in an unprecedented manner.
Pakistan should remember one thing. Afghanistan is universally described as the graveyard of empires, much more strong and with internationally experienced spreading the empire. People who live in glass houses should not try to throw stones. So I think I wouldn't mind if they do it. They would be inviting trouble for themselves, because that would mean they're burning their boats with Iran, with Tajikistan, and with the entire international community. Fine. And the Russians are doing it to take their revenge back on the Americans. And the Chinese are doing it because there's a lot of money in it, which they're looking for. I mean, the amount of natural resources, precious metals, and which are now said to be under Afghan soil, is huge.
Some dispute that too. Some people dispute that too, G. Parthasarathy. They say the studies that were carried out to assess the mineral wealth of Afghanistan are now very old, and no reassessment has been done in a long time. And if such rich resources were there, they would have been exploited by now by someone or the other.
Well, that's because it's been unstable. It's been unstable. Nobody has been able to do it. But no serious journal dealing with minerals has questioned those figures, entirely. Yes, you could have doubts of whether you're going to have lithium there or copper, there, but the question of its having those resources is, not an issue. And China already has a couple of copper mines which it has not exploited yet.
Okay. General Katoch, now in this scenario, what are the options for India? Because it for now wants to, be there for the people of Afghanistan, and there are people of Indian origin there who are still stuck there, and there are people who are minorities there who have affiliations with India as well, whose interest India wants to look after. So how does it go about doing that?
I think the first thing is, I think India has to look after India's interests. That of course is paramount, and the ambassador Parthasarathy, he'll bear me out on that. So India will look after India's interests. But at the same time, our interests are intrinsically tied up with the interests of the people of Afghanistan. Now, how do we maintain those interests? Because Afghanistan also gives us entry point to the Central Asian republics.
Yes.
So Afghanistan has been very critical, is very critical for India, and Pakistan has always played the spoiler, specifically because of their own idea of what an emirate should be. So, in my view, I think India has to engage with whichever government comes into power in Afghanistan. But at the same time, I would like to state, and this is my personal view, engagement does not mean recognition.
Okay.
If we recognize the government of this Taliban government, which will be composed of a very large number of terrorist groups, then I think we will be losing the only leverage which we have over that group. They desperately want India to recognize them, because with Indian recognition, they get legitimacy. Now, I don't think we should give them that legitimacy, so don't recognize them. But however, there is a government there, we have to deal with somebody, well, deal with them. That is one. Number two, I think somehow if we can carry out a supply lines through Tajikistan, some aid or something, to the border people, that may be a possibility. We have got, we maintain the airfield at Tajikistan, so that is a possibility. But I think there's a third point which perhaps needs consideration, and it is a much more important point. I think if Pakistan, as I have been stating, is the focus, then I think we need to address issues with Pakistan and make it very, very expensive for their military on the line of control. Now, can we do it? Should we wish to do it? I don't know, but that option is also there on the table. The ceasefire agreement which we have had was really at the Pakistani request, because they wanted to be free to do whatever they wanted in Afghanistan.
Right.
It has paid them well. It hasn't paid us well. So, do we need a change in scenario? And one last point, you see, their drones have been the Pakistani drones have been coming over into Indian territory continuously. I feel we should declare any movement of drones across the line of control or across the international border, and any move of terrorists across the international border or the line of control as an act of war, which will be responded to accordingly. That, I feel, is a deterrence which has to be given to them, and we should act on a deterrence philosophy.
Okay. G. Parthasarathy, your views?
Well, I would go along with what the general says on the deterrent. But let us not forget that the Pashtuns don't exactly love the Pakistani Punjabi. No Pashtun government, not even any one of the Taliban, recognizes the Durand line as a border. That is a disputed border.
They have a problem with the fence right now.
Fences, the Afghans know much to deal with much more difficult things than fences. But I think we should never forget that basic fault line. No Pashtun has recognizes the Durand line, and certainly when the government starts feeling the economic pinch, their governments normally take to other forms of diversion. So let's wait and see. As I said, as I go along with General, that you have to keep in touch with them. How we do it, we'll do it in consultation with friendly countries.
Okay.
And we will also have to keep a focus on people of Indian origin.
So, issue-based engagement, but that can only happen once a government emerges in Kabul. Just stay with us for a bit longer, because British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has said that no terrorist in fact, he said that no terrorist attack has been launched by Al-Qaeda from Afghanistan in 2 decades, due to efforts by UK veterans and armed forces. He was speaking in the British Parliament. Let's listen in.
If anyone is tempted to say that we have achieved nothing in that country, or still tempted to say, Mr. Speaker, that we have achieved nothing in that country in 20 years, tell them that our armed forces and those of our allies enabled 3.6 million girls to go to school. Tell them that this country and the Western world were protected from Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan throughout that period. And tell them, Mr. Speaker, that we have just mounted the biggest humanitarian airlift in recent history. 8 times, the RAF rescued more than 400 people on board a single plane, the most that had ever travelled on an RAF aircraft in its 103-year history. There are very few countries that have the military capability to do what we have just done.
So there you have it, Boris Johnson saying that to those who view this as a defeat, this is why it's not a defeat. What is your perspective on that, General Katoch? Well, I'm told that our guests are no longer with us. Let's move on for the time being. Well, Prime Minister Modi interacted online today with the healthcare workers and COVID vaccination beneficiaries in Himachal Pradesh, which is the country's first state to achieve 100% first dose vaccination of all eligible beneficiaries. The PM termed the state's people as champions in the battle against the pandemic and urged everyone to also take the second dose.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Monday interacted with healthcare workers and beneficiaries of the COVID vaccination program in Himachal Pradesh via video conferencing. Addressing the gathering, Prime Minister said Himachal Pradesh has emerged as a champion in the fight against the worst pandemic in 100 years. He added that Himachal has become the first state in India to have administered at least 1 dose of corona vaccine to its entire eligible population.
हिमाचल के लोगों की इस सफलता ने देश का आत्मविश्वास भी बढ़ाया है और आत्मनिर्भर होना कितना जरूरी है ये भी याद दिलाया है। सबको वैक्सीन, मुफ्त वैक्सीन। 130 करोड़ भारतीयों के इसी आत्मविश्वास और वैक्सीन में आत्मनिर्भरता का ही परिणाम है। भारत आज एक दिन में 1.25 करोड़ टीके लगाकर रिकॉर्ड बना रहा है। जितने टीके भारत आज एक दिन में लगा रहा है वो कई देशों की पूरी आबादी से भी ज्यादा है।
After Himachal Pradesh, Sikkim and Dadar and Nagar Haveli have achieved the 100% first dose and many states have come very close to it. Prime Minister said that those who have taken the first dose must also take the second dose. Prime Minister appreciated the work of people involved in the vaccination drive.
ये उपलब्धि सभी स्वास्थ्य कर्मियों, आशा कार्यकर्ता, आंगनवाड़ी कार्यकर्ता, शिक्षक और दूसरे तमाम साथियों के बुलंद हौसले का परिणाम है। हिमाचल में वो हर प्रकार की मुश्किलें थी जो टीकाकरण में बाधक सिद्ध होती हैं। पहाड़ी प्रदेश होने के नाते लॉजिस्टिक की दिक्कत रहती है। कोरोना के टीके की स्टोरेज और ट्रांसपोर्टेशन तो और भी मुश्किल होती है। लेकिन जयराम जी की सरकार ने जिस प्रकार की व्यवस्थाएं विकसित की, जिस प्रकार स्थितियों को संभाला, वो सचमुच में प्रशंसनीय है।
The Prime Minister expressed happiness that even in a remote district like Lahaul Spiti in Himachal has been a leader in vaccination. He praised the people of Himachal for not allowing any rumor or disinformation to hamper the vaccination efforts.
आस्था, शिक्षा और विज्ञान मिलकर कैसे जीवन बदल सकते हैं, ये हिमाचल ने बार बार कर दिखाया है। हिमाचल वासियों ने किसी भी अफवाह को, किसी भी अपप्रचार को टिकने नहीं दिया। हिमाचल इस बात का प्रमाण है कि देश का ग्रामीण समाज किस प्रकार दुनिया के सबसे बड़े और सबसे तेज टीकाकरण अभियान को सशक्त कर रहा है।
Prime Minister said that fast vaccination will also help tourism in Himachal Pradesh and lead to employment for youth. Prime Minister said the modern technology and digital technology will bring transformation in health and education sectors in coming days in Himachal Pradesh.
इससे हिमाचल में हेल्थ से लेकर कृषि जैसे अनेक सेक्टर में नई संभावनाएं बनने वाली हैं। ड्रोन अब दवाइयों की होम डिलीवरी में भी काम आ सकता है, बाग बगीचों में भी काम आ सकता है और इसका इस्तेमाल जमीन के सर्वे में तो किया ही जा रहा है। मैं समझता हूं ड्रोन टेक्नोलॉजी का सही इस्तेमाल हमारे पहाड़ी इलाकों के लोगों का पूरा जीवन बदल सकता है।
The Governor, the Chief Minister, BJP National President JP Nadda, Union Minister Anurag Singh Thakur, MPs, MLAs, Panchayat leaders among others were present on the occasion. During the interaction, talking to Dr. Rahul of the Civil Hospital in Shimla, the Prime Minister praised the team for minimizing the vaccine wastage and discussed their experience about serving in a difficult area. Bureau Report, DD India.
President Ramnath Kovind on Monday presented the President's Colour to the Indian Naval Aviation at a ceremonial parade held at the INS Hansa base near Panaji in Goa. The Navy was the first among the Indian Armed Forces to be awarded the President's Colour on the 27th of May 1951 by the then President of India, Dr. Rajendra Prasad. Subsequent recipients of the President's Colour in the Navy include the Southern Naval Command, Eastern Naval Command, Western Naval Command, Eastern Fleet, Western Fleet, Submarine Arm, INS Shivaji and the Indian Naval Academy.
It is indeed a momentous event in the history of naval aviation as it completes 68 glorious years in the service of the nation. I would like to congratulate all officers and sailors, past and present, for achieving this feat. The President's Colour presented today is the recognition of exceptional service rendered to the nation in peace and war. Naval aviation has an exceptional record of professional excellence and has discharged its responsibilities with honour and distinction.
Special fish are being released in ponds in Uttar Pradesh's Firozabad district to curb the spread of dengue. And in Kerala, efforts have been intensified to both trace the origins of the Nipah virus outbreak in Kozhikode, which claimed the life of a 12-year-old boy on Sunday, and to stop the spread of the disease within the community and to nearby districts. Take a look.
Kozhikode, Kannur and Malappuram districts in Kerala are on high alert following detection of Nipah virus in Kerala, which claimed the life of a 12-year-old boy in Kozhikode on Sunday. Health experts have warned people to remain cautious and alert about the spread of the disease. As part of finding the source of origin, Animal Husbandry and Forest Department team took samples of suspected animals and fruits from the homestead where the Nipah incidence was reported.
It is not really carried by the human being. It is carriers are the animals, and especially the fruit bats. We have observed in India, fruit bats are the most important, but these fruit bats can transmit also to our domestic animal like pigs, goats, cats, horses and others domestic animals. So from animal to human, jumping of this virus is a very dangerous step, and which is we call it a spillover. And once this virus goes into the human circulation, then this virus transmits from human to human.
8 samples of those who showed symptoms have been sent for testing. As of now, 32 people are identified in the high-risk category and 251 are identified in contact list of the deceased patient. Earlier on Sunday, the central government had rushed a team of the National Centre for Disease Control to Kerala and had given all necessary advice to the state. Meanwhile, Tamil Nadu has also increased surveillance on the border of its districts adjoining Kerala so that Nipah's detection is checked. Meanwhile, Uttar Pradesh government is working on a war footing to contain the increasing cases of dengue in the state along with rising cases of corona. Firozabad district administration has released Gambujia fishes in many ponds of the entire district. Gambujia fish is a larvicidal and kills the larva of vectors in the stagnant water where vectors breed.
गम्बूजा मछली की क्वालिटी है कि वो जो डेंगू का लार्वा उसे खाती है और एक दिन में करीब करीब 100 लार्वा खाती हैं। जब 100 लार्वा खाएंगी तो ये इनकी ग्रोथ होती रहेगी। आज हमने 50 पैकेट बदायूं से मंगवाए हैं और लगभग उनमें 25,000 मछलियां हैं, विभिन्न तालाबों में डलवा दी हैं प्रशासन के सहयोग से। हमारे डीएमओ साहब साथ में थे। उसका क्या होगा कि आने वाले समय में वो तालाब में जो लार्वा होगा वो अपने आप ही वो गंबूजे मछली खत्म कर देगी।
In most Nipah outbreaks in South Asia, the virus has displayed a stuttering chain of transmission, meaning that once the virus spreads from fruits, bats to humans, it moves mainly to people in close contact with the patients. That's where it becomes a highly pathogenic paramyxovirus with high mortality rates. Bureau Report, DD India.
Now, in another milestone in COVID-19 vaccination campaign, India administered more than 1 crore doses on Monday, thrice in the last 11 days. The cumulative COVID-19 vaccination coverage crossed 69.68 crores in the country on Monday. In the meantime, with the timely tracing, tracking and treatment, country has been controlling the spread of the virus as well. India's recovery rate is currently standing at 97.44%. In the last 24 hours, 43,903 patients have recovered across the country as well. So far, a total of 3,21,81,995 patients have recovered from the virus. The country has reported 38,948 new cases in the last 24 hours. Active cases account for 1.33% of the total cases. India's active caseload stands at 4,04,874. Weekly positivity rate is less than 3% for the last 73 days and it is currently 2.58%. Daily positivity rate reported to be 2.76% for the last 7 days as well. More than 53.14 crore samples have been tested across the country for COVID-19 too. Politics now, and Bharatiya Janata Party has criticized Congress leader Rahul Gandhi for tweeting an old photo and describing it as a present one. Speaking to reporters in Delhi, BJP spokesperson said that it had become a habit of Rahul Gandhi to stray from real issues and to run the party based on propaganda.
कभी राहुल गांधी भ्रम की राजनीति के माध्यम से, झूठे फोटो के माध्यम से राजनीति करने का प्रयास करते हैं। अगर अंग्रेजी में कहा जाए तो राहुल गांधी हैज बिकम द पॉलिटिकल कुकू ऑफ द प्रेजेंट डे इंडियन पॉलिटिक्स। कुकू चिड़िया जो होती है वो कभी भी मेहनत नहीं करती है, वो कभी भी अपना घोंसला खुद नहीं बनाती है। अपने परिश्रम नहीं करना और दूसरों के कंधे पर बंदूक रख के चलाने का प्रयास करना, यह राहुल गांधी जी का आदत बन चुका है।
Now, a virtual review meeting on the implementation of special livestock sector packages and schemes with all the states and union territory ministers was held on Monday. The meeting was chaired by Minister of Fisheries, Animal Husbandry and Dairying, Purushottam Rupala. The meeting deliberated and discussed on state-specific issues and requirements of states to boost growth in the livestock sector. The National Livestock Mission portal was launched at the meeting and the Basic Animal Husbandry Statistics 2020 were also released.
कई लोगों ने बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण सुझाव दिए हैं और अपने राज्यों में चलती अच्छी प्रणालियों का उजागर करने का भी प्रयास किया है। हमारे देश का पशुपालन विभाग जिस दौर से गुजर रहा है और उसके सामने जो चुनौतियां हैं उसको हम कैसे सरलता से निपटा सकें, जो नई योजनाएं हमारे प्रधानमंत्री जी के दिशा निर्देश पे जारी किया है उसका धरती पर अमल करने का काम अब सब राज्य सरकारों के माध्यम से ही हमें करना है।
Minister of State for Fisheries, Animal Husbandry and Dairying Dr. L. Murugan and Dr. Sanjeev Balyan also participated in the national level virtual review meeting, wherein detailed discussions were held on implementation, challenges and probable solutions for special livestock sector package.
It's a great step after long gap. This will synergize all our efforts in one direction. The implementation of a special livestock sector package will ensure focused development of animal husbandry and dairying across the country for next 5 years. The Atmanirbhar package extended to this sector envisaged to incentive the investment in related infrastructure. Schemes like Rashtriya Gokul Mission, National Program Dairy Development, National Livestock Mission and targeting the desired stakeholders in this journey.
A series of Poshan Jagrukta Abhiyan, that is nutrition awareness campaign programs under Poshan Ma, were organized at various places of Mumbai among different sections of society on Monday. Union Minister for Women and Child Development Smriti Irani and Union Minister for Minority Affairs Mukhtar Abbas Naqvi attended these programs, which are being organized jointly by the Union Ministry for Women and Child Development and Union Ministry for Minority Affairs. Poshan Abhiyan has set goals to reduce child undernutrition and low birth weight by 2% a year and anemia across age groups by 3% and create a mass movement for good nutrition in the country.
अपनी आमदनी देखे तो सुपोषित बच्चे के कंपैरिजन में उसकी आमदनी 20% कम होगी। इसका मतलब कुपोषण जीवन भर की चुनौती बन सकता है। अगर हम ये वर्ष अमृत महोत्सव मना रहे हैं, आजादी के 75 साल हम मना रहे हैं, तो ये संकल्प लें कि जब हिंदुस्तान में 100 साल हम आजादी का उत्सव मनाएंगे, तब हिंदुस्तान कुपोषित नहीं होगा, हर बच्चा सुपोषित होगा। ये संकल्प अगर लेकर हम इस संकल्प की पूर्ति के लिए अपनी ओर से योगदान देंगे, तो निश्चित रूप में प्रधानमंत्री जी का ये संकल्प, देश का ये स्वप्न साकार करने में हम सब सहभागी हो पाएंगे।
Prime Minister Modi will be addressing the inaugural conclave of Shikshak Parv at 11 in the morning on Tuesday through video conferencing. And on this occasion, he will launch multiple key initiatives in the education sector to encourage innovative practices and improve quality education in schools across the country.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi will address the inaugural conclave of Shikshak Parv on 7 September 2021 via video conferencing. PM will also launch multiple key initiatives in the education sector during the event. The Prime Minister will launch Indian Sign Language Dictionary, audio and text embedded sign language video for the hearing impaired in conformity with Universal Design of Learning, talking books, audio books for the visually impaired, school quality assurance and assessment framework of CBSE, Nishta Teachers Training Program for Nipun Bharat and Vidyanjali Portal for facilitating education volunteers, donors, CSR contributors for school development. Theme of Shikshak Parv 2021 is Quality and Sustainable Schools, Learnings from Schools in India. Its celebration will encourage innovative practices to ensure not only continuity of education at all levels, but to improve quality, inclusive practices and sustainability in the schools across the country as well. Union Education Minister will also be present during the event. Bureau Report, DD India.
Now, as part of India's ongoing chairship of BRICS in 2021, Prime Minister Modi will be chairing the 13th BRICS Summit on the 9th of September 2021 in the virtual format. The theme for the summit is BRICS at 15, Intra-BRICS Cooperation for Continuity, Consolidation and Consensus. India had outlined 4 priority areas for its chairship. These are reform of the multilateral system, counter-terrorism, using digital and technological tools for achieving SDGs, and enhancing people-to-people exchanges. In addition to these areas, the leaders will also exchange views on the impact of COVID-19 pandemic and other current global and regional issues. The meeting will be attended by President of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, President of China, Xi Jinping, and President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa. India's National Security Advisor, Ajit Doval, President of New Development Bank, among others, will also be presenting reports on the outcomes pursued this year under their respective tracks to the leaders during the summit. This is the second time Prime Minister Modi will be chairing the BRICS Summit. Earlier, he had chaired the Goa Summit in 2016. Secretary in Union Ministry of Power Alok Kumar had an important meeting today. 3 important decisions were arrived at in the meeting taken by Secretary Power. First, of course, captive coal mine companies have been given a notice of 1 week to increase their production to more than 85% of their targets. If they fail, the supply of linkage coal to such states or GENCOs would be regulated. 2. Those states or DISCOMs which procure power from imported coal-based power plants have been given a notice of 2 weeks to meet their power demand from these power plants. In case of failure, the supply of domestic coal to these states would be regulated. And 3. Power plants having coal stocks of more than 10 days, but where plant load factor is less than 40%, the coal supply would be regulated to the extent of 100%. The coal supply to power plants having coal stock of more than 18 days will also be regulated to the extent of 100%. The coal supply to the power plants having coal stock ranging from 11 days to 18 days and having PLF more than 40% will be regulated to the extent of 50%. A 6-member central team headed by Joint Secretary in the Ministry of Home Affairs Rakesh Kumar Singh held a meeting with Bihar Chief Secretary Tripurari Sharan in Patna today and assessed the damages caused by floods in the state. In the meeting, the state government has demanded 3,781 crore rupees from the centre to meet the damages caused by the floods. In the meeting, the state government showed a presentation to the central team for the damage caused by the floods as well. Time to talk sports now. It was a dramatic 5th-day finish at the Oval as India ended its 50-year wait for a win at the venue with a 157-run victory against England on Monday. India last won at the iconic ground way back in 1971 when it stunned the hosts by 4 wickets to clinch the first series triumph in England. Virat Kohli-led side successfully defended 367 runs on the final day. England succumbed to some fierce bowling spells from the Indian bowlers. Jasprit Bumrah picked up his 100th Test wicket during the innings. This is India's 2nd ever Test victory at the Oval ever in history. And the Prime Minister has termed it a great day. Prime Minister Modi in a tweet said, and I quote, "Great day again on the vaccination front and on the cricket pitch. As always, hashtag Team India wins." And fast bowler Jasprit Bumrah added yet another feather to his Test cap. Bumrah walked into the Indian record books by becoming the quickest pacer from the country to claim 100 Test wickets. The 27-year-old pacer registered the milestone in his 24th Test after dismissing England's Ollie Pope on the final day of the 4th India-England Test at the Oval. With this, Bumrah beat Kapil Dev's record to become the fastest Indian pacer to achieve 100 Test wickets by getting there in his 24th match. Former Indian skipper Kapil Dev had got to 100 Test wickets in 25 games. And that's all we have for the moment in this edition of Newsnight Tonight. But for all the latest, stay tuned to DD India. Thanks for watching.